Hi there. Well, today I wanted to talk about sexual harassment. It's not like a fun topic, of course, it's really kind of depressing, but it is something that happens a lot. Um, and I think most of us have to deal with it at some point in life, especially if you're female. And I know it happens to guys too. Um, but it is something or a danger that's frequently associated with women. Um, because when it happens to us, more often than not, it's very scary. The guys who I've spoken to, when it happens to them, most of them told me that it was more amusing or annoying. But for women, it's usually just scary. So, and of course, that's not across the board. There are other situations where it's just as scary for a guy. But anyway, it can be something that's really difficult for an introvert to deal with. Of course, it's also horrible for an extrovert. It's just bad. But when you're an introvert, because of the way we process emotions, sometimes that can be an added burden on top of what's already happened. And we may not handle the situation because of our reserved nature in a way that has the best outcome. So I'm just going to try and kind of talk about that today. Sorry, my voice is all weird. So, first of all, I think sexual harassment needs to be defined. What is it exactly? Well, the dictionary says it is unlawful to harass a person, an applicant or employee, and I'm just like reading this directly, because of that person's sex. Harassment can include sexual harassment or unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature. It does not have to be of a sexual nature, however, and can include offensive remarks about a person's gender or sex. For example, it's illegal to harass a woman by making offensive comments about women in general. Both victim and harasser can be either a woman or a man, and the victim and harasser can be the same sex. Although the law does not prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that are not very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as the victim is fired or demoted. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer, such as a client or customer. Okay, so this is specifically referring to sexual harassment on the job, obviously. And that is often where it happens a lot at work. Um, and I think it's interesting how people don't have the same definition, even though there is that one definition across the board for what sexual harassment means in America. Americans have different definitions of what it means. Um, like sometimes something might happen to a woman at work where she feels uncomfortable and she mentions it to a male coworker and he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. But you'll mention the same incident to a female coworker and the female will be like, oh my God, are you serious? You should report this. I've noticed that a lot where I think because sometimes men have not been in that situation before or on the receiving end, the gravity of how bad it is, it's not fully realized. But thankfully, we do have a definition, a legal definition that explains that it's basically unwanted touching or referring to the person's gender or probably even, I think it includes sexual orientation in a way that's offensive and putting them down. So, yeah, it's it's difficult to define sometimes, but I do think that that definition, it's good. It just needs to actually be followed. That's all. But what often happens, anyway, moving on, what often happens when an INFP is sexually harassed by a coworker or an acquaintance, um, one of the first things that happens is usually we start to question our judgment. Like right after it happens, we're kind of like, okay, wait a minute, I feel things too strongly already. So are my feelings an overreaction? Did this person not cross any boundaries? And I'm just being really weird about nothing? And then we might struggle with that. We overanalyze that to death. And because we're struggling with it, we keep it all to ourselves for a time. We don't say anything to the person who touched us or harassed us. We might not even say anything to friends for a while. We just kind of keep it internally and struggle with, am I feeling the way I'm supposed to feel, or is this too much? After we're done trying to figure out if we have a right to be upset, the next thing we do is we might talk to a trusted friend and ask them, I feel upset. Do you think I have a right to feel upset? Here's what happened. And we explain it to them and ask for their opinion. And we might do that with a couple of friends. And if it is indeed sexual harassment, which it probably is, they will tell us, yes, that's bad. And then after we have some validation that our feelings are okay, then we start to worry about, how do I handle this? Is this going to keep happening? What do I do to stop it? And then we also struggle with feeling embarrassed about ourselves. Like, why did this happen to me? Why didn't I do this to that other person? What makes me different from the other women in the office that they targeted me? Am I dressing wrong? What am I doing? We start to, again, overanalyze things. And then on top of that, you're starting to get angry finally. You're getting angry at the person who harassed you. And then because you're an INFP, you're probably also getting angry at yourself for being angry at someone, because we don't like to get angry at people. So there's just this complete chaos going on inside of us where we're questioning ourselves, and we feel bad about ourselves. We're horribly angry. It's just not a good feeling. So, what can help? Well, even though sometimes our go to reaction to difficult situations is to pretend like they didn't happen and to jump into our imagination and live in a happy little fairy tale land, like maybe start working on, that book we really wanted to write, and put everything at work aside, all that sexual harassment aside, and start working on our novel. It's good to work on our novel because that's probably an outlet. It's very therapeutic. But at the same time, this issue with sexual harassment does need to be addressed. So instead of ignoring the issue, we do have to find our courage. And the first thing to do is to confront the person who harassed us, especially if it's someone who you have to see every day at work. Even though it's really difficult, find a way, like talk to friends to build you up to do this, but find a way to find the courage to go up to them and let them know exactly what they did that was wrong, why it was wrong, and that they can never, ever do that again. Now, in the past, I tried to do this, and I got nervous when I approached the person, and I ended up, all I could say was, you were disrespectful. I couldn't say exactly what they did because I got too embarrassed and ashamed of myself, even though they were the one who was at fault. And all I said was, you have to respect me. I'm not going to accept anything otherwise. Which that was good to say, but I should have been more specific. If I could go back in time, I would have been more specific about what he did, like his physical actions that were wrong. Because what if he in the future does that to another woman and thinks that's okay? Well, I'm sure he doesn't think that's okay, but I should have been more specific in calling him out. So it helps to be specific and to stand your ground and let them know that they're not to ever do that to you again. The second thing to do is to document it. If it happened at work, for example, go to your human resources office and tell them that something happened that needs to be documented. Tell them in detail what happened. Let them know that if you don't want to press charges, you're not pressing charges. You don't want to, if you don't want it to go any further than this documentation, let them know. And the reason I say that is, again, in my situation, I chose not to do that because I was like, oh, this person is young and I don't want this going on their permanent record that they did something really stupid. No, no, there's a reason why a human resource office exists, and it's to curtail situations like that and it's also to help people who do offensive things and don't have the maturity to realize that their behavior is out of line. Like this kid in my situation, even though I'm sure he knew what he was doing was wrong, he didn't have the full scope of why. He didn't really understand that his motivation for what he did was the exact same motivation as a person who rapes a woman. Even though he did not rape, he had the same motivation, and that is where the problem is. So the human resource office is there to make sure situations like that don't happen again at work by explaining helping the person who does the harassing to realize why what they did was wrong, and then letting them know if they do that again, they're out. And that is the right way to handle a work environment. You shouldn't have to work in a place where you're worried about someone doing something horrible to you at work. That's just unacceptable. So I should have gone to human resources. Please do that. If something like this happens to you, face the offender and go to human resources and let them know what happened. The third thing is to seek counseling. And at first, this suggestion might seem like over the top. It might be like I know if I was watching this and I had never been sexually harassed before, I would think, really? It's not like you actually got, attacked. But it is. Someone invaded your privacy. They humiliated you. It is. And even though we put up walls to not have to confront how badly we've been hurt sometimes, that hurt will come out over time. It will seep out like a slow leak, especially for INFPs, over time. And if we keep holding it in or ignoring it by trying to focus on our art instead of on this thing that happened that bothered us, we're going to get worse and worse and worse. So we're going to get more angry and more confused and sad. So to address it, talk about what happened with a professional, with someone who's experienced in dealing with those kinds of situations, who can help you realize that your feelings are not invalid, that it's not bad for you to be angry about what happened, and that you can feel better, and that they can help you take steps to feel more at peace and put that situation behind you. So counseling, going to that, it's not a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of you taking control of a situation. You're taking steps to recover from something traumatic that happened to you. So yeah, those are the things that we can do. If we unfortunately find ourselves in that situation, talk to the person, confront them. And when I say confront, I don't mean that in a way like going up to them and yelling, which I'm sure most of us would not do anyway. INFPs can't yell usually. Not to go up to them angry, but to just be stern and firm and tell them what they did was wrong and they can't do it again. And then secondly, to document the situation with an official, if it's at school, someone in charge, or if it's at work with your HR department. And then thirdly, to seek counseling to help you find ways to rebuild your self-esteem and maybe to help you learn how to handle a situation in the heat of the moment the next time something like that happens. Because unfortunately, we do live in a world where it's likely that it will happen more than once, sadly. And as far as counseling goes, I know like for a long time, I didn't have extra money lying around just to go to counseling, but there are free services that you can take advantage of. And one of those might be the National Sexual Assault Telephone Line, and it's at rainn.org. And that's where you can get more information about like free counseling services that they offer. I hope that that was helpful. Um, and it's such a sensitive subject. I also hope that I didn't say anything offensive. Um, but if something like that does happen to you, just know, you're not alone, and you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that sometimes people don't realize how badly their actions affect other people. And other times they do realize it and they just want to hurt someone. Um, and either way, it's awful. But it is something that you can come through and be okay and be at peace in the end. Okay, well, thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a good day despite the grim nature of this video. Bye.